Hello, class. On our first day of class, the demonstration that I'm going to be doing for you guys is about gesture drawing. Behind me is a list of ideas that we're going to be thinking about and using as we work with gesture drawing. And the first one underneath there, it's talking about movement that connects. We'll be talking a bit about that. Longest axis, stretch and pinch, and enclosures. So what happens with this language of gesture drawings is that, say if we take this one, stretch and pinch, is what we're going to be doing is we're going to make a shape, and if I can get it right for you guys, we'll do it. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect this side as our stretch, and on this side we're going to bring it in and create a nice pinch. So it'll look something like this. So anyway, stretch and pinch. I'm going to edit out what I don't need. Into the stretch and pinch idea, you're going to find this as a rib cage. I'm going to place on here an angle to a head, and I'm going to tilt it ever so little. And so what we're going to find now is an axis line running this way, an axis line running this way, the upper part of the rib cage, the bottom of the pelvis, now reduced to a cube, and our central line going this way. Axis lines, as we talk about, longest axis line in your shape is going to be crucial. Shape can almost be anything. Now, what I'm going to do to just embellish it a little on the back of the skull, there's a place where the muscle inserts, and so we can kind of bring it through. On the bottom, just to kind of embellish it so you can see where these simple structures can take you, we can begin to put in the bottom of the hip like this. We can then take and then begin to place on a simple movement of a thigh, and then of course the other side as it comes through, and I'm going to leave it like that. Arm, we're going to think of our central axis line coming down to about here. I'm going to bend it out and of course just maybe move the hand in. I'm going to take an arm and raise it. I'm going to turn this up and then ultimately say this is the stretch, this is the pinch. So then we can take our simple constructions as pinch and stretch, place in a simple rib cage, and as you can see we can begin to construct a simple figure. So stretch and pinch, I'm going to have you guys look for throughout this class. Longest axis lines, we're going to be continuing to look for longest axis lines, which is going to give us relationships, and we'll be able to stay away from details. Another one with longest axis as a simple stick figure that I want to kind of show you. If I was to start with a guideline, and again, this is something that I'll have you do throughout the class. This is going to represent right through the pit of the neck if it's a front view and right down straight. So if I kind of think of a curve here for the back of the spine of where the head will connect, and a slight movement for the rib cage, and then I'm thinking of roughly where the hip is going to be, and then coming down for the foot. So I can kind of keep it in line with everything that I'm doing here. Now I can imagine if this is where the head will be, well, we'll gesture in a simple egg shape. And say if I tilt the head down a little bit and use a configuration like this, and say my center line is there, it'll give me a sense of direction in terms of how this head would be turned, say. So I've got it now like this. So shoulders, I'm going to raise this up on this side, maybe a bit more. Make it a little more dramatic. And then in here, I'm going to place on a reverse angle, so we get a stretch and pinch between the points of the pelvis. So now we've got that little configuration, and then what I'm going to do is take this leg, bring it through. So we got our long axis line. I'm going to extend this foot down a little bit. Our long axis line of the leg. I'm going to begin to think a little bit of a placement of a foot on the floor. So if I bring this down to here and across, over, and then this line of the foot coming through, we'll start to get a little feeling of how that would be. Our longest axis line coming from here to the elbow, elbow down, and then I'm just going to think of a curve of a hand, and of course this moving through a little long, and then coming up, and maybe just a turn of a hand sitting up there like that. So anyways, longest axis lines running through the body, simple stick figure. However, the simple stick figure has a rhythm, has a movement to it, which gesture is all about. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of this one. On the first day of the class, I gave you guys well, I guess before I get to that, every now and then I'm going to have to adjust the charcoal on the stick, so you have to bear with me. So what I want to do is show you one last one with this pinch and stretch idea. So say if we were to take an angle to a figure on shoulders as extreme as this becomes my guideline to tell me what the hips are doing. Because what I want to do is get a very extreme angle for shoulders. Off of this angle, we're going to connect these 2 points. Yep, connect these 2 points. And then from here, we're going to move it in, probably a little more severe, and then begin to connect this point moving through this way. So we're going to end up with this. Okay, there we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a head in here, and I'm going to tilt it even more, I think. I'm going to tilt it, let's tilt it horizontal. And we'll leave a little bit of a space in here for a neck. And then we're going to take our back of our neck, like I did before, but I'm going to move it over to the right so we get a little bit of a turn to it. And now this becomes my central line. Okay, I'm going to take a neck and place it in. And now is what we're going to notice, and we will talk about this a lot in the class. Right about where I've got this is the 7th vertebrae spine, so it's going to give us our connection to the trapezius muscle, which helps throw things in our right perspective. Okay. Off of this, I'm going to take a guideline. I got my lines a little mixed up here, so bear with me. Okay. What I was supposed to do on this guideline drawing, which I'm just going to go back and do it, and I wanted to do this so I could bring this to the guideline and bring this over and get this a little more severe like this. Okay, I think we're in better placements. Okay, that's what we wanted to do. Okay, so anyways, at this point is what it does now. It allows me to drop a guideline. I'm going to take a measurement and say from here to here, about halfway. Our halfway point is going to be pointed out here. We're going to be talking about this in depth, but our halfway point is going to be the pubic bone. We're going to use this as a guideline for the figure throughout this class. So irregardless of poses, you're going to be able to find that at a halfway point. So let me get my guideline in there a little better. So if that's my halfway point, which I've already now got it established, I'm going to take the back of the foot and imagine it here. I'm going to use, for the back of this hip, again a curve. And then we're going to take our movement to this side of our guideline. I'm going to hit my simple construction line and move it in. So my leg is going to be seen as a simple feel like a Gumby figure as it moves in. I'm going to angle this in and then begin to just think of the angle of the foot. This one on this side, we're going to take it, make it a bit shorter because it's in perspective. We're going to bring it in, back of the heel, angle of foot, make it wide to narrow. Heel would be in there. Our shoulder line is going to be here, so we're going to take our line of our shoulder and I'm going to swing up a curve, probably about as long as this, thinking about the movement of the arm on this side. there would be a come through roughly about here. So is what I'm going to do across the back. If I imagined a little curve to it, I'll give it a little more life. And then I'm going to bring up another curve and the feel of the stretch on one side, slight pinch on the other for the feel of that arm. On this side, this would come down, move down. Again, watch general axis lines. Even now I'm using a double line, a one on each side, a little different than the prior ones. This is going to come up. This is going to be our stretch on this side, our pinch on this side, which is going to now give us the feel of our quick little gesture. This arm a little bit further over and up. There we go. So, watching our beam torso configuration, stretch, pinch. Eventually we'll go back and watch our angles that will exist in here, but at the beginning, keep them as long and general as you possibly can. When we get rid of this one, the homework that I gave you on the very first day that we met, we were talking a lot about Andrew Loomis. And Andrew Loomis he had a particular way of working with the figure. And all of you have done some sketches now from him for this first day. And one of the things Andrew Loomis used to like to do is to take this pelvis and use two discs. And those two discs can be seen from any angle, which I'll show you in a moment. We can turn them like this, and they're overlapping, or in the front becomes a triangle. He used that as a guideline for the pelvis and a simple egg shape for the rib cage, and then broke up his heads again in a very simple way. So what I'm going to do is his pelvises, a lot of times, he would use a side view like this. He would just use a simple curve. He would take a front view and begin to use a disc on this side and a disc on this side, which is then easy to place the pubic bone in there because our pelvis then creates the all simple triangle that it is. And then we could ultimately take one and show this being closest to us, and then this one being behind. I'll draw it through ever so slightly. So this is in front, and so now the pubic bone is here, so it looks like our center line is this way. So you can overlap those shapes, and it's going to start to give you a lot of perspective. So the triangle is an excellent way with a series of gesture drawings that you guys are about to do. This is one of the modes we'll have you work in. So what I'm going to do, as I had just talked a bit about, I will put a guideline. So we're going to start off with our center line. Our center line, on the center line, as I mentioned, our midway point is the pubic bone. So I'm going to measure that out, try to get a placement. You'll do the same in your drawing. You're going to find quickly our halfway point, make sure it works. And so that works nicely. So I'm going to keep that locked in pretty tight. With this is what I'm going to do is, now I know this center line is the pit of the neck. This is a front view of a figure. So what I'm going to do is place in the shoulder lines. As you know, with gestures, is what we're doing is coming up with these simple lines running through heads in order to create them. Is what I'm going to do is place a head in here. I know where it now needs to be placed. And this axis line is going to go this way. So I'm going to place in a tilt so that there's a little bit of movement taking place to this head. And there we go. So my center line is going to be here. We would see a very little of the back of the skull here. And then ultimately the feeling of the neck curving down to this line will start to give us a little bit of the perspective. Off of that line, I'm going to take, this is now going to be my perspective center line. This is a guideline. Perspective center line means this is the sternum, the front of the figure. So before I start that, is what I'm going to do is place the pelvis, maybe about this high, and like Loomis would do, because we're conceiving this one now in that way of working, rather than long line directions and enclosures. So this pelvis, this would be the disc here, There's a slight angle to this, so this would be overlapped. So it would be moving in this direction with our pelvis. So what I'm trying to do here is get a little tilt to this curve of the ellipse. So now we've got a simple ellipse going, and we got a feel of a pelvis. I am trying to keep these straight. Okay. So now we've got that in place. I am now going to kind of feel out how far this rib cage is going to move, and I'm going to pull it way out like this. Tuck it in. Now they say a rib cage would be about a fist above our pelvis. So I'm going to make a curve to this egg shape, and it's going to pull all the way up here. I'm keeping it somewhat in line with the head, so there's some idea here. And then it would wrap behind our guideline and up, as we'll talk about. The axis line of this, if you notice, is very similar. This little tilt of it, our axis line is moving this way. Now, the neck is coming down here. This becomes the sternum bone. So once I can get a center to all of this, it'll tell you which way she's turned. And these center lines become also crucial in quick sketches and long sketches. Line of the opening of the rib cage is going to be in here. I'm going to bring it down around in here and over. So our opening of the rib cage will be like that. I'm going to put a guideline in here to show the angle of, was a male figure. I'm kind of conceiving it as a female figure, but I'm not going to flesh it out. I'm just going to put in how Loomis would lay out this figure, and then the simple curve of where that shoulder would be. So now we've got our simple guidelines for our figure. Through this now, I'm going to take this guideline through the rib cage, thinking of a arithmetic line, which we're going to talk more about in other classes, and how that arithmetic line of a long axis is going to pull this way. And then out of that, I might angle it a little different and come for a little bit of a knee. And then out of the knee, I'm going to pick up the tibia bone, and it's going to be a strong curve, and I got to watch my bottom. I'm going to keep the toe roughly here as if she's going up. And so we'll put a little turn to that, and we'll bring it down and around. So on the side of the pelvis, which we'll talk about in a moment, we're going to get what's known as the great trochanter, and that's going to move in. And now we're going to get this leg. So I'm going to watch the femur bone, and it's going to come in this way and make a slight deviation. As Loomis, if you remember what Loomis was doing with his lines, there's always slight movements in his lines. They're never perfectly straight. They might go from concave to convex. I'm trying to watch this angle. And then I'm going to work with the tibia bone. So I'm going to use a concave, and then I'm going to come back with a convex. So again, which I forgot to mention about to you guys, but I'm going to in a second. And so then I'm going to come back and think about the heel. And coming down on the toe, trying to keep these somewhat in line. Is what I forgot to mention to you guys was CSI lines. So basically is what happens, you have what's called CSI. These CSI lines are crucial to what I'm doing here, and it was crucial to all of them. Sorry I didn't mention them. But a CSI line means is concave, convex, S, okay, which can be a graceful X, like two of them together, something springing in action, like a person. This was a head, and then ultimately arms would be like that. And then we use straights, okay? So every line I'm putting down, I'm thinking of it one or the other. So the body is built on concave, convex, concave, convex, the whole thing. Sometimes we're going to be using straight lines. So really watch that as part of our language. This arm is going to be coming out of here, and is what we're going to do is come out with the bone of the upper arm. I'm going to keep this really simple. This would move around to our wrist, and then you would get the feel of a hand. It would get a little wider. I'll make a turn to it. It would come a little wider and thin. So I'm just going to keep a real simple movement of how it might turn as a gesture one into the other. I'm going to place an arm here. I might try to keep a guideline there. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to think of the wrist coming down to the arm. Our body is set up as these limbs don't usually, they tie, but there's a rhythm to them, so they're offset. One's here, one's here. This would come out, this would be here. They're always offset. And then what I'm going to do is think about a curve, maybe of a hand. Thumb would be out in this way. So you get kind of a feeling of a movement if I was to tie it together. So anyways, this is our Andrew Loomis sketch that all of you have done and all of you are familiar with. Once I finish this part of the demonstration is what will happen is you're going to be drawing in a similar way. I am going to show you another one in this kind of mode, thinking of the pelvis and the rib cage, thinking of the legs kind of like enclosures for the head, rib cage, and pelvis, and then of course kind of linear movements for arms and legs. So I'm going to set up a guideline here, and I'm going to move it over just slightly, and we will put it here. So I'm going to do this guideline, because I'm going to do a figure kind of up against the wall. Now with our figure this time, we're going to place in a cranium. Those of you who should be drawing along, watch the cranium. The cranium, we're going to talk much about it when we get into the head, but as far as the gesture, you want to be aware of it. This is a side view, so the front of the face would come out a little bit, I would say to about here. Sometimes we then use a guideline to tie these two together. And as you'll find in the future, we'll talk about the distance from the bottom to here, which is going to be at the bottom of the nose. So we get this kind of configuration to the profile. The jaw is going to be midway. It's got a strong angle to it, and there we've got our simple configuration of the skull at a profile. Now, with this, and we'll be going through skeletons and the rest and proportions actually in our next class, but I'm going to use that as a guideline. So what will happen is your spine will come out like this. There's a slight curve to it, not much. After that is what you're going to get is this rib cage. So this is important for these quick sketches. Up here is going to be an important landmark for us, the seventh vertebrae spine. But this is going to come, and we're going to bring our connection point here. It will hit my guideline, the back of the skull. The sternum bone will go this way. It'll come down about to here. If I was to measure this, and sometimes it's nice too, just so that you know, one cranium length comes to the pit of the neck, the next one, the bottom of the sternum, and of course the next one, the bottom of our rib cage. So those are, and I'm going to go through those also slowly next week. So this is going to come through, and our rib cage will come around, and we'll get that feel to it. It'll straighten up. This normally comes out a little bit, rounds off, and we've got the proper placement for it. But anyways, I want you guys to get familiar with this shape, and that it sits in the body like this, and this sits in the body like this. Then is what we're going to do quickly, as Loomis would do. He comes up with a pelvis. And I'm going to put the curve in here. The only thing I'm going to do different, I'm going to put it as a pelvis would be, there'd be a slight axis line to it like this. A slight axis line to it like that. So I'm putting a curve in there. I'm embellishing Loomis just very little, just so in the future, this will set it up well. The high point to here, you're going to see on the model the crest and the pubic bone, and this will come around. This will be the sacrum out here, and then basically I'm just going to generalize everything at this point. I'm going to put in this shape, and we get the feel of the pelvis. The leg is going to come out of here. So there's our generalization for our pelvis. The leg is going to be in here, and I'm going to take it and run it out. The bone of the femur is going to do this. It swells up a bit. On the bottom, it's going to make a little bit of a curve like this. It's very thick there. Excuse the charcoal. Every now and then I'm going to have to move this to get it back in place. this is going to come around, gets narrower, and it's going to connect into the great trochanter here. But mostly is what I need you guys to see is the feel of the leg as you're doing these kind of Andrew Loomis ideas. The lower leg, just watch its axis line, as we're talking so much about, long as axis, the axis line. The foot would come somewhere around here, so I'm going to put where the turn of it would be. And then is what I'm going to do is imagine a foot in here. So we've got to get the feel. So we'll do it like that, like a little skeleton foot. The only other thing that I'm going to make you aware of is where the opening of the rib cage makes its turn to the sternum. It becomes a landmark for us, and this becomes our scapula. I'm mentioning this to you now. You don't have to place this in at the moment. I'm more after the big shapes and the axis lines. I'm only mentioning it so you get a little familiar with it, where it's placed. And some of you that are in advanced or intermediate, I want you to put this in. So think about how that's going to be. The ball will set into the scapula. And then this bone takes a little bit of concave here. Convex goes to the bottom of the rib cage. A little concave in here. It makes a turn at the bottom. I know it's going to be hard to see over my other lines, but some of you will be able to take a look online at a skeleton. The lower arm, I'll bend it just a little. I'm going to bring it out. I'm going to put an angle because the bones would kind of make an angle at this point. And I'm going to just generalize my shape. Hands getting a little large. And I'm just going to take and cut in of how this palm might move into it like this. Another little gesture to the arm, I'll do this, and there'd be maybe the hand was sitting in here. I'm just going to keep it as if it's coming up. But anyways, our little scribble sketch, again of an Andrew Loomis, thinking of rib cage, its axis line, the movement that connects. You're going to find movements in here that I'm going to point out like this. Follow me carefully. It's going to come this way. The rhythm's going to pull back and all the way through our entire figure. Okay. A lot of them are going to interlock. The figure's full of interlocking movements. The other one that I need you to be aware of is interlocking shapes. There's a lot of it taking place. This is offset from this. This is offset from this. And right on down. This is connecting to our pubic bone, which I'm not going to connect. You're going to get your interlocking rhythms. At this point is what you guys are going to do is you're going to stop the tape. And you guys are going to be going online looking at the model list. And you're going to be drawing the number that I have on there, doing these two different systems. The first one I showed you with the pinch and stretch and the legs and the nice movements, and of course these Andrew Loomis ones. Okay, so welcome back. We're coming back for the last few minutes of this demonstration. On this part of the demonstration, we're going to be looking at the envelope and how to use it on certain poses. It works out well. After a while, you'll discern on certain seated poses. It's invaluable. Other poses, we don't use it at all. Certain tripod standing poses, we use it a lot. So, here's what I want to do is show you one. We're going to start off with our center line again. And with our center line, I'm going to locate my middle. And so all of these are going to be similar to finding our centers. I'm going to just guess at this, see what I've got, how close it is. It's actually pretty close. So I'm going to leave it. I am going to let the legs become just a little longer. So with this pose that we're thinking about is what I'm going to do is place the shoulders about here. I do want to place that in as a guideline. And with this as a guideline, hold on. Then we're going to kind of place a little bit of the angle of our, I'm going to change our direction. So I'm going to place it in this way. Okay. So what I want to do is from here to the feet. And then is what I'm going to do is the leg on this side is going to be extended a fair amount. And there's the leg furthest away is going to go back a little bit. So with the envelope, you're trying to find a height line. You're trying to find your widest point to this whole thing. So then is what will happen is I'm going to kind of figure out loosely where I'm going to make this stretch and pinch shape, and I'm going to say it's there. On this particular drawing, the head is going to bend in this direction. So I'm trying to give myself some points of reference so that when I place in this head, I got an idea of how to make the rest of the envelope, which I want to show you. So this is going to go in about here with the head. So with the head being there, I'm going to take roughly the center of it, and I'm going to connect this point, because that's what our envelope is what's our major directions, and then what is this point coming back in this direction. So anyways, I'm going to kind of box her in this position. This feel of this rib cage now is going to come around, and I'm going to pull it out a bit and watch where the stomach is. This is our pelvis bone. So I'm going to bring it around. Somewhere there's got to be a stomach, so I've got to make a feel to the curve. We know that the pubic bone is there, and this line would become a little bit lower. And so now I'm going to curve around this for the back side and bring it in for a pinch, and then ultimately the width of the rib cage kind of flowing in through this way. So anyways, I'm going to try to get that in. I'm going to edit some of these lines just so that you can kind of see what it's up, because there gets to be a lot of lines here. So anyways, we got that as our movement. This is our midway. This head now, I want to try to do something with it. So the front of the face is going to be here. So I'm going to take it. I don't want it down any more than that. So I'm going to bring this angle up. So I've got my egg or my ball a little big. So I'm going to shrink it a little bit. So you can see the angle of the jaw that I'm placing on underneath. This would go this way. This, in a sense, if it would make any sense, is going to be the back of the skull moving here. So this is the underside of the jaw. So now I can connect the underside of the jaw to the pit of the neck, and then ultimately the back of the skull, which is going to move up to the top part of my drawing. So just so that becomes a little clearer. Okay, so now we got the bean torso. We're trying to come up with some rhythms and lines that interrelate. So I'm going to take the leg with a slight concave to a convex and go down to the knee. And I'm going to bring this up and widen it and do it this way, just to put a little more shape to this upper leg. So it's coming around a la Andrew Loomis in one sense. And then I'm going to come with our feel of our leg and bring it in. Long line, bring it to your general axis line. That tells me the angle of the foot, which automatically can give me the feel of the heel at its right angle and how the angle will go. Anyways, our center line, our new center line moves this way, our perspective center, if you will, and this becomes the side of the figure. I'm going to bring our other leg in. I'm going to swing it around. And then a knee, I'm thinking of the angle of the front and the side. So it's a very angled shape. And then we're going to bring it through to where the foot would go, and then the angle of the foot, which would go this way. And it would hit my construction line there. So it would bend forward in this direction. I'm going to try to make it just a little darker so you can see it. So that would do that, and that would give us our perspective angle. Into this, here's our front line of our clavicles, and that line is going to become also important for you guys in the near future. The upper arm, I'll do a little bit with the feel of the deltoid. This would swing in a little bit for the bicep muscle. I'm going to make a quick swing for the upper arm. The muscles on this side would be high, so I'm going to cross over because the bones would. And then we're going to come with another feel of how these fingers might just be. It sounds like I got it a little long, but I'm going to leave it. This angle here, I'm going to edit so you can see it a little better from the front of the face. This line from the upper part of the body is going to extend. And then we're going to get the turn of our elbow. This would go this way. The turn of the arm would come down. This is going to come over. And now I'm going to bring it up. With wrists, you want to think this way, even in a quick sketch. If it becomes a 3-minute sketch, watch the boxiness of it like that. Watch the angle of the top of the hand. Watch the knuckles. It'll give you the perspective, because then this line will be skewed and short, and the fingers would end up moving in that direction. So it'll give you the feel of that. The muscle will then join, and her head should be tucked low into the shoulder is the idea. Okay. Back of the skull. Okay, so again with our envelope. So we got to locate where the head is. The central line was the pit of the neck, so I knew where to come with the line ultimately. This is our long general line. We found a midway point. This leg wants to hit where the point was. This wants to hit the toe where this point was. Because what you got to do is estimate your feet through the center and the triangle. As you can see, things are going to stick out, but that's fine. Things will stick out of the envelope, is what you want, is the heart of it. So I'm going to show you one last simple figure with the envelope. I'll adjust my charcoal one last time, and we will finish this up. And then after this one, you're going to be using the envelope in several of your drawings when you start. So this one I'm going to do the same. I'm going to find my center line. Maybe I'll move it over a bit. I'm going to find my center line. And so there we go. So I'm going to find midway point. So over and over, same thing. Midway point is the easiest way for measurements. We will break down subtleties in a little bit, but with these quick gestures, you can throw this in really fast. From this is what I'm going to do is find the feel of where I want the shoulders like I did before. So this time we're going to bend this short on this side, long at this side, and is what I'm going to do is place where I want my ball of the head. So I'm going to come with the envelope in just a moment, because this is the back of the neck where I've got this ball. So on this side is what we're going to get is this leg is going to be out a little bit further, and this leg maybe not out as far. So this I'm going to take a convex line like this, and this one I'm going to try to connect it because of the way the leg is going on a concave line this way. So again, this is kind of using our triangle back view of a pose rather than a front view of a pose, but coming up with the same sort of idea. So now is what I want to do is I want to extremely take the rib cage and angle it in. And then from that, I'm going to use an angle, and I'm going to think of the pelvis now. I'm going to use a little bit of a different twist, but not much. I'm going to put a curve here. And then is what we're going to do is angle this way. And so I'm going to use this as my guideline. And then I'm going to use it as if it's like a cylinder. I mean, it's one way we can view the hips. It's another way. So I'm adding little things so you can kind of perceive it like that. It gives you a little bit of form right from the beginning. And then this is going to connect because it's a stretch and a pinch. So with this idea, I can then take the front of my face, because I'm going to have him looking up more, so I'm going to add an egg to it in the direction I want his head to go. So I've got a ball and an egg here now going. And then this becomes the back of his head. I'm going to put a little plane there. And this becomes ultimately the front. So is what I then have going is the back of his neck is going to be here, and his shoulder will cover up some of this. So anyways, now we've got a head looking up slightly, and now we've got our angles in place. So is what will happen. Watch your center lines. This will follow the rib cage now. Here's the small of the back. Watch for these plane breaks in here. From the small of the back, this is the area between the pelvis, where you're going to get familiar with it in the class, where the oblique muscle is. I got a cylinder there, so it helps me think of how a line can curve over a cylinder. So now we've got all of that in place. Now our simple leg direction, I want to hit the foot somewhere about here. And so then is what we're going to do is we're going to take this line, and I'm going to bring it over and then bring it in and bring it through. And here it'll be the same, coming down, and we'll take this foot and run it severely up like that so it hits my guideline. The heel would have a little bit of an angle to it. I'm going to use that line as a way to feel out the other side of the foot. This you wouldn't see this line, it's just the way that I kind of get it. So on this side, then we're going to take the leg, and I'm going to use a convex to a concave and run it through. On this one, I'm going to use a concave to where the muscle is, and a convex, and turn it into where the heel is. So again, convex, concave. So these lines, we're still using these strong, Gumby type lines, and they're just convex, concave, and a very general, simple possibility. And then this leg will be here. The heel will come this way, and then the feel of the foot will go back. Into all of this now, I'm just going to take an arm. Think about simple direction. This head would be a little bigger back there, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring this up a little bit. And then this arm is what would happen. We'd see a little bit of, it would overlap his body. It would come this way to the elbow, and then on the outside, down to the wrist, and then it would hit onto his leg somewhere about there. And eventually we would break down back of leg, front of leg. So basically that's our envelope. Just strengthen it, and then the figure within the envelope. So is what you guys are going to be doing is getting on the computer, as I mentioned, and do some seated poses, do some front views, back views. Even if I would try to avoid reclining poses at the moment, unless you're an advanced student. If you want to try this with a reclining pose, it will help get your proportions, that's for sure. And I will see you in the next class.